Roblox jobs. You roleplay like you're at a real job and just have fun. Wait, what? You get paid for this? How much? Like, if I spent the next 24 hours in these games, could it actually be worth my time? For the next 3 days, I'll be tirelessly grinding to answer that question, working 8-hour shifts at the top 3 most popular Roblox jobs. And to start, I need to actually get hired. Joining the training facility on my new account named I Love My Roblox Job, I instantly noticed these jobs are popular. I'm scared I might not get the job. There's so many people. But despite my worries, after about 40 minutes of training, I was hired. I'm officially a junior juicer. Starting the 24-hour timer, I headed to my first of 3 jobs. Hokui Cafe, a smoothie bar. For my 8-hour shift, I have to make meals, drinks, and serve customers. Unfortunately, though, it wouldn't be that easy. Yeah, this game has about 28 workers in it, making it a little difficult to find a counter someone isn't already at. Regardless, after about half an hour of searching, I am not kidding, I finally found an open register. Yes! Okay, I finally have it. Oh my god. Overjoyed to start at last, I patiently waited for my first customer to arrive. This shouldn't take long. This is taking long. Remember how I said there's 28 workers here? There's only 9 customers. That ratio seems off. But still, after waiting 1 hour, I finally managed to find someone. Oh my god, wait, is this my first real customer? I took her order, made some food, handed it over, and as a thank you, she tipped me 5 Robux. Oh my god, you take that! I got my first tip! Yeah, if someone likes your service, they can donate Robux to you. It's the best way to earn money in these games and becomes very important later in the video. But for now, I was just happy to make my first dollar. I made my first money! I actually did it! Unfortunately though, that didn't even come close to completing my goal. 150 Robux. Let me explain. This avatar is nice, but it doesn't look like me. And to make it look like myself, I'll need to get 90 Robux. And because of the 40% tax, if I want 90 Robux, people will have to pay me 150 Robux. So far, I've been paid 5. Yeah, even though they're great, tips aren't the most reliable way to earn money. And lucky for me, they weren't the only way. I'm still waiting for my next real customer to arrive, but while I wait, I found another method to get paid. Points. Earlier, my trainer told me that in-game points can be exchanged for Robux later on. I don't know the conversion rate. It could be as good as 1 point per Robux, or as bad as 100 points per Robux. But at the end of today, I'll find out. Hopefully, the amount will be worth it. To get points, you just serve food. That's it. Doesn't matter if you serve it to a person or a robot. So, I served as many robots as possible, because they're easier. Plus, rule 1 of this challenge is that I can't stop working for anything. So it was nice this could give me something productive to do to not break that rule. But donations from human customers are still the quickest way to earn money that I know of, and thankfully, I was about to encounter some. When I met human customers, I didn't just make their order. I had a chat with them. I figured getting to know them would maximize my chance to get tipped. Sometimes I asked how their day was. Sometimes I talked them through a breakup. Yeah, this person had just broken up with their boyfriend and vented to me about it for half an hour. But honestly, I didn't mind. Usually in real life, I'm a bit nervous to talk to strangers, but this is a dumb kid's game, so there's basically no anxiety. In fact, I quickly learned that my favorite part about this challenge would be talking to people. I know earning money is my #1 priority, but I want to chat during this challenge as much as possible too. Anyways, after hearing about this person's breakup, I gave them a strawberry cake pop. It was pink and matched their avatar. This will surely make them feel 100% better. Oh, also in this hour, I got called cute 2 times. That was weird. I have good news and bad news. The good news is that every single customer I talk to says they're rating me 5 stars and compliments me. The bad news is that I have not made another cent. I've been paid 5 Robux in 4 hours. If I continue at this rate, I will fail the goal horribly. Plus, my customers are just decreasing more and more as the day goes on. Why is there barely anyone here? It was then I saw something in the corner of my eye. Something strange. The amount of managers here was crazy. Like more than I'd ever seen. I mean, it's nothing out of the ordinary to have a manager or 2 standing in the store. They usually like to sit and watch, looming over us peasant workers from their managerial throne. Never moving, never ordering, never working. They're basically completely useless and do nothing but fill up the game. And right now, for some reason, there were a lot of them. So many, in fact, that customers couldn't join. There wasn't enough room in the server. Well, maybe it isn't so bad. These guys look pretty wealthy. Maybe I could go over and talk to them. Let's just ask them, and alright, I am getting completely ignored. Just say no, man. You don't have to pretend I'm not there. Whatever. They may be preventing me from meeting any human customers, which is annoying, but at least I can still serve robots. I'll just take this as an opportunity to buckle down and grind some points. What? Why did you drag me away? Yeah, I guess one of the managers decided they wanted to host a game of musical chairs. And to do so, they teleported everyone away from the cafe and forced them to play. Why am I being forced here? I need to work. I was starting to get a little annoyed, but whatever. I could just reset my character and head back inside to resume my shift. This place was a ghost town, but I could still serve robots. Just had to prepare this food and it wasn't working. Can I not even do my job anymore? I can't even. They've disabled my job because they want to play musical chairs. I'm leaving the server. I can't do anything else. The management has ruined it. But it gets even worse. Remember how at the beginning of the video I had to wait half an hour before even finding an open counter to work at? Now I get the pleasure of doing that again. I am not happy, and while I search for a new counter, subscribe. But, as always, you are only allowed to subscribe if you are actually enjoying the video. I mean it. New counter. New counter. I see new counter. No! He stole it from me. This sucks. I hate my life. Unfortunately for me, managers continue to be a problem throughout the rest of this video, to the point of me potentially getting fired later on. I'm starting to hate managers. They do nothing but sit there, clog servers, and ruin my job. There's 2 customers. Is every single manager just a useless piece of shit? Annoyed that I couldn't find a register to work at, I decided to take my 1 meal break of the day, which brings me to rules 2 and 3. Rule 2, I have to work 8 hours a day, just like a real-life job. And rule 3, I do get 1 30-minute meal break every shift. It's against state law to not allow employees a meal break, and I wouldn't want to get arrested or anything. Anyways, I came back from my meal feeling refreshed, and after mopping the floors a bit, ranked up to normal juicer. Oh, I've been promoted. 15 cents. Okay. Goodbye, stupid junior juicer rank. I make senior juices now. Alright, that's all for the good news. Bad news is managers are filling up the server again. At least I can serve robots without them breaking my job this time. Probably. Hopefully. And one thing that previous managerial incident taught me is that serving robots is actually really good. Like, way too good to ignore. Out of my total points, I'd say 90% have been from serving robots. 90%! Talking to real humans is way more fun and fulfilling, but if I plan on converting these points to money later, I need to serve more NPCs. So, I did. I still had no idea what the conversion rate was, but I was looking forward to the end of the day when I could find out. Surely it would be worth it, right? It didn't take too long before my brain started melting bad. I had to ask my robot customers to repeat their order every single time I served one, sometimes multiple times. For reference, at the beginning of today, I had no problem remembering orders with up to 4 items. Now I could hardly remember orders with 2. My mind was scattered, and the reason for that was something I didn't expect. The workflow. Doing this NPC strategy, there's no downtime. There's never a second where I'm free to look down at my phone or do something else. Plus, I've been all alone for the past 6 hours. I haven't spoken a word to anyone. I have no coworkers to chat to or anything to give my mind a break. I just memorize an order, make the order, give the order. Memorize an order, make the order, give the order. Memorize an order, make the order, give the order. I am majorly burnt out. For most of my challenge videos, I get to call with friends. In this challenge video, because of Rule 2, I had to maintain full concentration on my job. Talking to friends would only distract me. But since I'm nearing the end of my shift and not feeling great, I figured I'd invite some friends for me to show off my job too. Little did I know the insane situation this was about to cause.
Okay, hold on, let me, I lied about my name being James, by the way. Blue Hawaii and
Hello?
2 extremely glazed donuts. Okay, bad news, I broke the game. Can you just pretend I gave you all you needed because it removed them from my inventory?
Yeah, thanks, bro.
Now, while watching this footage, you may have noticed my 3 friends I invited lining up behind my counter to wait for their order. In this game, having a line isn't just uncommon, it's near impossible. You saw how hard it was to get 1 human customer earlier. They're so rare that I haven't seen more than 3 in the building at a time. Why would they choose to form a line instead of just going to one of the other 20 registers? It just doesn't make sense. And apparently, I wasn't the only one who thought that, because even more people were lining up out of curiosity. Everyone wanted to know what the deal was with my register, which led to them lining up to get to the bottom of it, which in turn expanded my line, making my register an even bigger deal. The feedback loop grew larger and larger until this many people were in my line. By the way, I told my 3 friends to not donate any money to me, as that would be cheating, but I didn't tell these people anything. I'm being faced with the biggest opportunity I've had all challenge to make some good tips. I can't waste this. So I put on the conversation act I've been practicing over the past 7 hours and started burning through customers. There's so many people. The line is like 10 people long! But still, I was having great conversations with everyone in line, and they all started to really like me. Most importantly though, they were giving me some fat tips. Don't take that out of context. I was making so much money that I couldn't count it all. A 5 Robux tip here, a 20 Robux tip there. Yes, yes, I got tipped! I was doing great. A little too great. As my line got longer, I realized I was sapping away all the customers from my fellow workers. It was so bad that they started coming to my counter to try and convince the customers to order from them instead. I'm basically doing the exact same thing I got mad at the managers for doing earlier, preventing others from getting customers. It sucks not fully capitalizing off such an amazing opportunity, but I will be 6 feet under before I start acting like a manager. So I told everyone that I was stopping cashier work for the day and encouraged them to go visit my coworkers instead of me. Don't worry though, I'm not quitting. I'm just gonna mop until they go away. Fun. That quick span where I took their orders was still hyper successful though, and those aren't even the best tips I get in this video. Anyways, I wasn't sure how many Robux I got, but it was definitely a lot. Not enough to win the challenge, but a lot. Sadly though, I wouldn't know for sure until the very end because of Rule 4. I'm not allowed to check how many Robux I've earned until the challenge is finished. Figured it would add some mystery and keep me on my toes. Last hour of the first day. After all the chaos from earlier died down, I went back to serving robots. It was still boring and managers were still clogging the server, but all of that was just a distraction from the lowered mental state I mentioned earlier. And during this moment, it was about to reach the worst it's been. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's fireworks being launched outside my house. It is very close to the 4th of July as of filming this. I would really like to go see them. I was just thinking, I was like, I heard them and I was like, dang, I want to go see those. And then I realized I can't. God, they're loud.